All right, so you sent over Glenmark Pharmaceuticals Q3 FY24 earnings call transcript and
Yeah.
their MD&A,
Yep.
and you want the inside scoop.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, strap in because this deep dive is about to get interesting.
I'm ready.
We've got a major shakeup in their India operations. Ryaltris is making waves globally,
Yeah.
and a fascinating foray into new drug discovery.
Lots to unpack,
What really jumped out at you from all of this?
honestly. The sheer ambition of their plans. They're not just tweaking things around the edges. They're overhauling their India business, setting aggressive targets for Ryaltris, and jumping into the complex world of oncology drug development. It's a bold combination of moves.
It definitely is. Okay, let's break down these bold moves, starting with what's happening in India. A 16% revenue drop in their home market, that sounds pretty dramatic. But Glenmark insists it's all part of the plan. They're consolidating stock points, streamlining inventory, essentially trying to create a leaner, more efficient distribution system. What do you make of this strategy? Is it a necessary correction or a risky gamble?
Well, it's a bit of both, isn't it? Whenever you overhaul a system that's been in place for a long time, there are bound to be some hiccups. And we see that reflected in the short-term sales dip, even though the actual consumer purchases,
Right.
they call secondary sales, are actually up.
Interesting.
What's fascinating here is that Glenmark is basically acknowledging that their old three-tier distribution system, while widespread in India, had become bloated and inefficient. They're betting that this restructuring, although painful in the short term, will ultimately lead to better margins, tighter control over their inventory, and even help them combat counterfeit medications, which is a huge problem in that market.
So they're taking a short-term hit to set themselves up for long-term success.
Makes sense. And speaking of success, let's move on to Ryaltris. It's already launched in over 30 markets. And from the data they shared, it's gaining some serious traction, even hitting 18–19% market share in some regions. Plus, there's that projected $80 million in revenue next year.
Yeah.
What's your take on Ryaltris potential, especially considering their plans for China and Brazil?
Well, first, it's important for our listener to understand that the $80 million projection is Glenmark's own revenue from Ryaltris, not the total market sales. That distinction is crucial because it shows how much they stand to gain directly.
Right.
Now, the allergic rhinitis market is huge globally, and China and Brazil represent massive untapped opportunities. If Ryaltris can capture even a fraction of those markets, we're talking about a potential blockbuster for Glenmark.
Wow.
To put it in perspective, imagine a company finding a product that suddenly generates a significant chunk of their revenue. That's the kind of impact we're talking about.
It explains why they're so focused on replicating that Ryaltris success story.
It's definitely a compelling story. And it ties into their next big move, the ICNA's Glenmark Innovation Alliance, or IGI. They're not just content with generics anymore. They're diving headfirst into developing new drugs, specifically in the oncology space. What stood out to you about this alliance and their research pipeline?
A few things, actually. First, the fact that they're merging Glenmark's expertise in small molecule drugs with ICNOS's focus on biologics. That's smart. It gives them a broader platform for drug discovery.
I see.
Second, they've already got 3 lead oncology candidates in development, targeting multiple myeloma, leukemia, and solid tumors.
Wow.
That's ambitious in itself. But what really caught my eye was that 2 of these candidates have received orphan drug designation from the U.S. FDA.
Now, for our listener who might not be familiar with the world of drug approvals, can you unpack what orphan drug designation actually means and why it's significant?
Of course. Basically, it means the FDA recognizes these drugs as potential treatments for rare diseases, which comes with certain perks for Glenmark.
Okay.
They could be eligible for faster approval times, tax breaks, and even market exclusivity for a certain period.
Interesting.
This could be a game changer, because even if just one of these drugs is successful, it could generate substantial revenue for Glenmark, with potentially less competition. They're clearly hoping lightning will strike twice, and they can find the next Ryaltris within their oncology pipeline.
That's a fantastic point. It highlights just how much is riding on the success of these new drug candidates. So we've got a major restructuring in India, a potential blockbuster in Ryaltris, and a foray into cutting-edge oncology research. And that's all before we even get to their U.S. strategy.
It seems like Glenmark is firing on all cylinders right now.
It's certainly an exciting time to be watching this company. And we're just getting started. There's still a lot to unpack, including their plans for the U.S. market and a major financial move that could change the game for them. All right, well, let's not keep our listener waiting any longer. Let's dive into Glenmark's U.S. strategy and see what they've got cooking across the pond.
The U.S. market is always a key battleground for pharmaceutical companies, and Glenmark is no exception. What's interesting here is that they're taking a very strategic long-term approach. Instead of just flooding the market with a bunch of new generic products, they're building out platforms in three key areas: injectables, respiratory treatments, and drug-device combinations.
So they're thinking about the bigger picture, setting themselves up for sustainable growth in the U.S. market. Can you elaborate a bit on those three platforms and why Glenmark seems so focused on them?
Absolutely. Let's start with injectables. These are complex medications to manufacture, and Glenmark is strategically partnering with other companies to gain a foothold in this space. Think of it like this. Instead of building a factory from scratch, they're collaborating with someone who already has the expertise and infrastructure. It allows them to enter the market faster and with less upfront investment.
That makes a lot of sense. And I remember they mentioned their Monroe plant in the U.S. playing a key role in their injectable ambitions.
Right. The Monroe plant is going to be crucial for their manufacturing capabilities, giving them more control over the production process and potentially higher profit margins down the line.
So partnerships for market entry and then leveraging their own facilities for long-term success. That's a pretty savvy approach. What about the respiratory platform? We've already seen their success with Ryaltris. Are they looking to expand on that?
Exactly. Ryaltris has given them valuable experience in developing and marketing respiratory treatments. They're likely looking to leverage that knowledge to create a broader portfolio of products in this category, potentially targeting different respiratory conditions or patient populations.
It seems like they're really trying to establish themselves as a leader in respiratory care, building on the momentum they've gained with Ryaltris. And what about the drug-device combination platform? That sounds particularly intriguing.
Drug-device combinations are a growing trend in the pharmaceutical industry, and for good reason. These products often offer advantages over traditional medications, like more targeted delivery, improved patient compliance, or even new ways to administer drugs.
Can you give our listener an example of what a drug-device combination might look like?
Sure, imagine an inhaler that not only delivers medication to the lungs, but also tracks how often the patient uses it, and even sends that data to their doctor. That's the kind of innovation we're talking about with drug-device combinations. It's not just about the drug itself, but also about how it's delivered and how it can be integrated into the patient's overall care.
That's a really clear example, and it highlights how Glenmark is looking beyond just developing pills or injections. They're thinking about the entire patient experience and how technology can play a role. So they're shaking things up in India, achieving global success, with Ryaltris pushing the boundaries in oncology and laying the groundwork for a strong U.S. presence. But there's one more piece of this puzzle we need to discuss: the Glenmark Life Sciences divestment. They're selling a 75% stake, which is expected to bring in a sizable amount of cash. What are your thoughts on this move?
It's a bold financial move that could have a significant impact on Glenmark's future. By selling a majority stake in Glenmark Life Sciences, they're essentially freeing up a large chunk of capital that they can now reinvest in other areas of their business. And remember, they've stated that this will likely make them debt-free. That financial freedom opens up a world of possibilities.
It's almost like they're clearing the decks and giving themselves a fresh start financially speaking. What do you think are the most likely ways they might use this influx of cash?
Well, they could become even more aggressive in the U.S. market. We know they're already building out those platforms we discussed, but imagine what they could do with even more resources. They could accelerate the development of their oncology drugs, potentially bringing those life-saving treatments to market faster. They could also explore strategic acquisitions, buying up smaller companies with promising technologies or products that complement their existing portfolio.
So the divestment isn't just about becoming debt-free, it's about giving them the financial firepower to really pursue their ambitions. It's like they're setting themselves up for a major growth spurt.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating. We're not just looking at a company that's trying to maintain the status quo. They're actively transforming themselves, making bold moves across all aspects of their business.
It's a great example of how a company can adapt and evolve to stay ahead in a dynamic industry like pharmaceuticals. They're not afraid to make tough decisions, invest in innovation, and chase ambitious goals.
And it's a reminder that sometimes you need to let go of something to grab hold of something even bigger. By divesting from Glenmark Life Sciences, they're essentially freeing themselves up to pursue a whole new set of opportunities.
It's a classic case of short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. They're taking calculated risks to position themselves for a brighter future. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive restructuring and India global expansion, with Ryaltris, a push into oncology, and a major financial shakeup. What are your final thoughts for our listener before we wrap things up?
Well, it's a great question, and it brings up an important point. Strategy is one thing. Execution is another
Right.
for Glenmark. One of the biggest challenges will be managing this period of transition effectively. They're undergoing a major restructuring in India, which could lead to disruptions in their supply chain, or even alienate some of their longtime distributors.
Yeah.
Balancing those short-term challenges while
Mm.
still focusing on long-term growth. That'll be key.
It's like juggling multiple balls in the air at once. They can't afford to drop any of them.
Exactly. And let's not forget the inherent risks associated with drug development. It's a notoriously expensive and time-consuming process. And there's no guarantee of success,
True.
even with those promising oncology candidates. There's a chance they might not make it through clinical trials or secure regulatory approval.
So while the potential rewards are huge, they also have to be prepared for setbacks along the way. It's a high-stakes game. And they need to be smart about how they manage their resources and their expectations.
Absolutely. Another potential challenge lies in the increasingly competitive landscape of the global pharmaceutical industry. They're going head-to-head with some of the biggest players in the world, not just in established markets like the U.S., but also in emerging markets like China and Brazil.
Yeah, that's a good point.
To succeed, they'll need to differentiate themselves, whether that's through innovative products, strategic partnerships, or a laser-sharp focus on specific therapeutic areas.
It's almost like they're playing chess on multiple boards simultaneously. They need to think several moves ahead and anticipate their competitors' next steps.
And it's a game where the rules are constantly changing. New technologies are emerging, regulations are evolving, and patient expectations are shifting.
Right.
Glenmark will need to stay agile and adaptable to navigate this complex environment.
So while their ambitious plans are certainly exciting, it's important to remember that there's no such thing as a guaranteed win in this industry. It's a combination of strategic vision, smart decision-making, and a bit of luck.
Well said. And ultimately, that's what makes this deep dive so compelling for our listener. It's not just about understanding the numbers, it's about appreciating the complexities of the pharmaceutical industry and the challenges and opportunities that companies like Glenmark face.
I love that. It's a reminder that business, especially in an industry like this, is never just black and white. It's full of nuances, trade-offs, and calculated risks.
It's about making difficult decisions, adapting to changing circumstances, and constantly striving for innovation. And it's about recognizing that success is never guaranteed, but the pursuit of it can be just as rewarding.
Well said. So to our listener who brought us these fascinating documents, we hope this deep dive has provided you with valuable insights into Glenmark Pharmaceuticals and their ambitious plans for the future.
We encourage you to continue exploring these topics, read the full earnings call transcript, and dive even deeper into their MD&A document. Form your own opinions, ask your own questions, and maybe even challenge some of our assumptions.
That's what this is all about, sparking curiosity, encouraging critical thinking, and empowering you to become a more informed participant in these important conversations.
And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. We'd love to hear your thoughts on social media. What stood out to you? What questions do you still have? Let's keep the deep dive going together.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.